I'm really annoyed that I can't get your screen to work.
Have you
I mean, I've
switched?
literally tried nothing other than pressing a button, but I'm annoyed about it.
You should be livid. Which button did you push?
I pressed the button that was the on switch, and
Okay,
it
and
said
then
signal cable not connected.
is the signal cable connected?
I don't know which one the signal cable is.
Okay.
Oh, the signal cable isn't connected.
Hey, welcome to Beer Christianity. My name is Jonty.
I'm Laura.
And I'm Malky.
Hey, and this is going to be episode, I want to say it's like 97, 98, something like that. We are getting
We
very,
can have to do
very
something special
close.
for 100.
I know, I think we really should, because we're close to 100 episodes,
Yeah.
and that's...
Harry and Chris on again. It's like
yeah.
our go-to.
I think we should. Don't say that's our go-to, because we'd be very honored to have Harry and Chris on our show, obviously.
We're very honored.
Welcome, listener, to Beer Christianity. This episode is actually, despite the frivolity, on a sad note, and because of a sad occasion. Professor Jürgen Moltmann, one of the most significant Protestant theologians of the last 100 years, I would have thought, author of The Crucified God and known from Theology of Hope, Jürgen Moltmann died this week. And yeah, we wanted to commemorate that using an old interview that I did with the good professor many, many years ago in 2013. I did the interview, I think, for an event called Catalyst Live. Thank you very much to the people in charge at that time for giving me permission to use the interview to do whatever. Anyway, it's really interesting. It gives you a flavor of Jürgen Moltmann and what he was like. And I think just addresses a whole bunch of different questions about life from somebody who is much smarter than any of us. And so we thought we'd just take you through some of the questions and have a little bit of discussion of each one. So you'll hear a question from a much younger Jonty, some answers from Professor Moltmann, and then us chatting for the next hour. So if that sounds like your jam, then this is the episode for you. If it's not, feel free to go back and listen to our last one, which was all about deconstructing, where it's us and a whole bunch of other people talking about their experiences or not of deconstructing their faith. Well, before that, you can hear me just opining on Palestine, I think just on a day that I was particularly angry about what Israel is doing to the Palestinian people and the Christians who seem to support it with no regard for Palestinian Christians or for human decency, as far as I can tell. So anyway, we should start with this question for Professor Moltmann.
Moltmann.
Professor Moltmann, how are you?
Yes, very much on time.
Is it okay for you to talk for a bit?
Yes, you sent me several questions.
Yes. To the questions, we're in an age currently which has quite a lot of intellectual resistance to religion, particularly in the West. What is the best thing that Christians can do to engage in the mission of the mind, in witnessing to people who have intellectual doubts?
Well, faith means to live with God and in God, and in the fullness of life. And the new atheism is offering only a reduced life. You can, of course, live without God as much as you can live without music. But what's the sense of it? It's a poor life and a reduced life. And this new atheism is only alive as long as there is faith in God. If theism is vanishing, atheism is also vanishing. So it's not a real option.
I quite like that. That's a very 2013 question of talking. Do you remember when we were all super worried about Richard Dawkins and we thought that everyone took him more seriously than anyone else on the planet? Maybe they did. But that question.
You don't want to ask the question of what I was doing in 2013 because you don't want to know
How old were you in 2013?
I would have been 2016. No, what am I
Would have
talking
been
about?
2016.
16.
That's very old for. You don't look a day over 1,000. Even today. What is your
Oh,
skincare routine?
I was 16.
16.
16 in 2013. I was visiting South Africa, fun fact.
Oh, nice. Which
Yeah.
is where I am right now, dear listeners.
There you go.
But yeah, that question very kind of, reflecting the anxieties about new atheism and Richard Dawkins and all that kind of stuff. And I think at the time I found that a disturbingly kind of triumphalist answer. There were a lot of apologists at the time who were very kind of down on all the new atheists, and I remember finding it a little bit kind of disturbing. And now that that's not so much of a thing, it feels a lot more reasonable to me, even though I'm significantly more liberal. I don't know. How do you guys experience that answer?
Yeah, I think like towards the end, actually saying, because it can sort of feel arrogant and dismissive to say, oh, we can live without God as you can live without music. But to kind of say if theism is dwindling, then so is atheism. Like it's two sides of the same coin. It's that sort of fundamentalist, dualistic approach, isn't it? Like, which is much smarter than just going like, oh, they're idiots because they don't believe in God. Do you know what I mean? It's saying they're kind of approaching it from a, I don't know. It feels like they're that sort of new atheism is approaching it from a style that's that sort of, I don't know, first year university student combative arrogance, you know?
And I think it's interesting looking back on that now and looking at, I guess I don't know. I feel like probably the whole church, I guess, at the time was kind of concerned about this kind of wave of new atheism, but thinking about at least the right wing church at the moment, I think their worry is less about non-Christians, but more about Christians that believe different things to them and believe things that they think will threaten their own Christian beliefs, and in some ways are kind of more aligned with right-wing atheists than they are with left-wing Christians, right? Like, the Malky's favorite person that he has on the wall and revered
Never
every
letting
day,
it go.
is Jordan Peterson. And I have heard more conservative Christians say, well, I hear from young people who are hearing all these things from Jordan Peterson. They're coming to talk to me about like Christianity, and isn't that fantastic? And and it's like, I mean, insane, obviously, but like it's kind of weird how that shift has happened, right? Of that kind of like you see the more the right wing anti-feminist, particularly kind of people, influencers particularly that have arisen, and how that's kind of aligning with the like Christian nationalists in America and stuff.
There's actually a few points in this interview where I think it reflects quite interestingly on today, because a little bit later he's going to talk about anti-intellectualism within the church. And I think influencers like Jordan Peterson, and we should always refer to him as an influencer rather than anything else, they propose a kind of intellectualism, but it's intellectualism for stupid people, I think, is that's how I say. He's what a dumb person would think of as an intellectual, or their idea of an intellectual. I gotta say, I really liked the analogy of you can live without God, but it's like living without music. I thought that was more of a gentle than an arrogant thing. I think the other stuff of saying that it is a life of, I can't remember what he says, if it's a life, but basically saying it is a life that's empty, or I think that probably can ring a little bit arrogant to people who don't believe. But I think, again, he's talking about new atheism, which is this kind of, it's not just the absence of belief, but an active kind of wanting to disprove everyone else's belief, which I think is, as you say, very similar to kind of fundamentalist forms of Christianity, which want to attack what anybody else believes. I just think after our last episode, which is very kind of, postmodern and post-evangelical and all of those good things, to remember that there is something of value, and to not place that value in a kind of, well, it makes you a better person, which I think is a truly belittling argument, that like the only people with morals are religious people, or it's the only thing that can make you happy, which I don't think is true either. But just that thing of it adds richness. I think that's a beautiful argument for the value of faith, like nobody needs music, but it does add richness to our lives. I don't know. I really liked it.
I think it's reminiscent of something you've kind of spoken about, Jonty. I think it's just something we've spoken about when we were talking about Dan McLeod, of like the idea of removing the supernatural element of faith. And I think you can have that. You can go into the history of the Bible and of Christianity as much as you like, and you can appreciate Jesus as a person and the things that he taught as an individual, as a human. But you do lose something without the supernatural, without that spiritual element, and that's the music, right? That's the thing that brings the richness. That's the thing that brings the something special, Yeah.
What do you think, Mark?
Also, I don't know if this is quite on the same wavelength, but it reminds me of I heard Terry Eagleton.
We love Terry.
Responded to a question, and he said something along the lines of, belief in God is not like belief in Bigfoot, of which we may or may not have enough evidence, and we don't quite know yet.
You shut your fucking mouth about Bigfoot. It's not the jackalope. Sick.
It was probably used the abominable snowman, probably because it was more, musical. But yeah, sort of, it can feel like you're sidestepping the question, but certain sort of thinkers or intellectuals, I don't know how to phrase this properly, but somehow manage to, they're not sidestepping the question, but it's like, it's a category error to kind of go, oh, are we going to try and prove God, use these or that arguments? Like, well, no, like God is, and we'll take it from there. It's like music. And that's not said in a way that's just like, well, I'm right, fuck you. It's kind of this is what I'm interested in discussing kind of way.
Yeah. And I think especially when you know that Moltmann is not he believes in universal reconciliation. So what a kind of alarmist evangelical would say is that he's a universalist. And he's not saying this because you need to turn or burn. He's just saying this is a valuable and beautiful thing. And as you say, don't make the category error of focusing on these other things. Yeah, no, I think that's a beautiful point. Absolutely. Do we want to listen to the next question? Brilliant questions, by the way, incisive, just really smart. I definitely edited out not all, but a lot of the like, brilliant. Yes, absolutely. Yes. So
classic interview technique.
In terms of the church's response, I've spoken to several Christians, particularly Christians who work in the scientific field or in the fields of scientific apologetics or philosophical apologetics, who say that there is a trend in some parts of the church that is anti-intellectual. I've heard this from Catholics, from Protestants, from across the spectrum. I was wondering if you agreed with that and what the cause of it was, if you did.
Well, I'm sorry to admit that there are trends of fundamentalism in Christianity, especially in the southern parts of the United States and in the Muslim world and also in Judaism. But this is not living faith to be anti-intellectual. The intellect is given by God and must use to understand what you believe and understand why you are in the world. So we must overcome this type of fundamentalism in the different religions. And another point is that fundamentalism is dualism. Here are the faithful, there are the unbelievers, and the unbelievers must be suppressed or killed. This is an anticipation of the strange idea of Armageddon, where at the end the final battle between God and the devils will take place. This is not Christian. This is apocalypticism in the modern form.
Again, I just love this man's vibe so much. Apart from the fact that he's clearly, if you've ever tried to read Moltmann, it's some intense and very dense stuff. And he's talking to somebody who is clearly a lot less smart than him. My questions are not deep theological questions at all. And he's like, sure, I'll answer that. No worries. Which I love gracious, very smart people. What did you guys think of that?
It's one I kind of struggle with, but I think maybe I'm just lazy. Because I like the idea of, I wouldn't want to put somebody off faith in church because of the idea of needing to understand things, if that makes sense. That I feel like that's a really dumb way of putting it. But like, I feel like I have been in environments where I have not pushed things that I am more convicted of because I am in an environment where I am not the intellectual in the room. So I have the preconceived idea of like, well, I'm not going to win that fight, so I'm not even going to broach it. And I think part of that is less anti-intellectualism. Partly that's more of just creating environments where questioning is less acceptable. So yeah, maybe that's, I don't know, I feel like I've got some internal unpicking to do around that, you know? Because I think kind of in some ways both thoughts of both kind of sides are valid. Like the intellectual wanting to dig deep into it is valid, but also I have a conviction that this is true, and I believe of what I know of God that this must be true, and I don't necessarily need to have like the scriptural like knowledge to back it up. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
I think it's more when I talk about anti-intellectualism, particularly in the church, it's kind of, at that point it was a minority but loud voice, and now it seems everyone in QAnon is an anti-intellectual. Most MAGA people are anti-intellectuals.
Sure.
They'll say things like, we don't care what experts say about wearing masks, or, I mean, if you saw recently the anti-Fauci stuff, the man who has, done ridiculous amounts to try and first in the 80s save the gay population from AIDS, just trying desperately to get any funding out of Reagan, and then subsequent warnings on pandemics that were coming up, including Ebola and all that kind of stuff, and then warning about a future pandemic, and then when the last one hit. And anti-intellectualism is saying, we don't care what experts say. I think it's a natural outworking of postmodernism misunderstood, saying, well, if there is no canon, then we don't have to, then there must be no expertise, which I think is an unfortunate, result of going, well, if there is no truth, then how can there be experts?
Yeah.
Or why would we care about them? Which
I
again,
mean, it's all the stuff, all the questions coming out of the Donald Trump trial, isn't it? Of like, well, the trial is going to affect nothing because everything up to this point has been, oh, well, that's not true, so obviously this trial will not be true. Like,
Yeah, and you watch any kind of Jordan Clapper Daily Show interview about with a kind of MAGA crowd, and he'll say, okay, but these are the facts, and they'll be like, no, I don't believe that.
Yeah.
I think that's what anti-intellectualism is. It's not that you have to be an intellectual or intellectualize your faith. It's more just the idea of going I think even in our circles, you'll have people who go like, I don't care what theologians say. I'm not into theology. I just read the Bible.
Yeah.
The denial that theology happens every time you read the Bible. The denial that there is any thinking to be done whatsoever. It's not non-intellectualism. I think it's anti-intellectualism. That's the and he quite rightly immediately jumps to fundamentalism. That is where that happens.
And I think the trap that I fell into as I was walking past my wife listening to a podcast episode that I featured on recently, when I was kind of paraphrasing my thoughts of, I might think this and the Bible says that, and then I think it's bollocks, which I believe is a quote from myself. But that can be the trap that we may fall into, you know. But I also, you know, like to torture myself listening to people I disagree with and theologians that I do and don't agree with, and look to try and follow some vague sense of tradition, or, you know. But yeah, I think the version that to turn it back on myself, because equally I immediately go to like the flat earthers and anti-vaxxers. But I suppose it's at its heart, it's an unwillingness to look beyond your own people, your own little echo chamber, is the buzzword I was looking for, you know?
Yeah.
I think as well, it's partly of like people nowadays have so much information at our fingertips, right? Like I could Google anything, whatever. And I think that has, it's so hard to verify what is true in that you have, well, it's not hard to verify what is true, but you have so many different facts, opinions, thoughts coming at you anytime you open your phone. And it's very easy to, as many hundreds and thousands of millions of people have, just by using what they see on Facebook, to just say, yeah, like that's true. That's I will just accept that because I've seen that here. And I think that but then you kind of have, which I feel like it's the kind of trap that I often find myself falling into, of you have an awareness of that being the problem, of like, well, I can't just believe everything that I see because I'm either gonna believe everything or I'm not gonna believe anything. And that prevents me then finding the true answer.
Yeah.
You know, you kind of just shut yourself off from the actual pursuit of the actual truth. You just learn nothing.
And I think that kind of crisis of credibility and authority that we find ourselves in is, and I'm not a Jordan Peterson stan or anything like that, and I'm not anti-postmodernism.
Unlike other members of the podcast.
For the record, Malky is not actually a fan of Jordan Peterson. He just has a picture he himself drew of him on the wall of his office.
And I'm just lazy about, I need to, I have to choose a different one, print it off, collect it.
It's insurmountable.
Frame it in a frame that you already have. Because it currently has a picture of Jordan Peterson in.
But anyway, I'm not a fan of him as much as Malky is, but and his whole like postmodern Marxism is going to turn the frogs gay or whatever. But like, I do think that postmodernism, if we dismantle the old canons, if we dismantle the old hierarchies of authority, it's necessary, it's important, but you are left with a vacuum of why people would automatically believe. It does come down to just choosing your authority because it's no longer a natural one. And I think that's what results in this, or is what causes this. It's a crisis of, if radical incredulity is the baseline, then you are left with the problem of why the hell would we believe that? Oh, well, and again, it's not like there's no reason for it. Not liking big pharma is, you don't have to be a tinfoil hat guy to recognize the things that huge pharmaceutical companies have done that have been evil or that have harmed people. You don't have to be a right winger to recognize that, the BBC has reported in a biased way. When you consider, again, you just have to dig a little bit deeper and go, okay, but let's count them. Let's look at the evidence. Let's ask how many Conservative Party chairs from their universities have gone to lead the news department of the BBC versus radical socialists. That's a question you can ask, but everyone just goes, well, you can't trust the lamestream media anymore, and it becomes this anti-intellectualism, which can be quite. The problem is not intellectualizing. The problem is not trusting people who have done some study. Again, when we go back to the Dan McLeod stuff that he does of people going, well, just because you've got a degree doesn't mean you get to tell me what to believe. It's like, no, I'm just telling you what the academic consensus is on the origin of this passage. And being willing to believe experts, I think, becomes harder and harder when you're post-authority, I think is maybe the thing. Anyway, let's listen to another one.
An example of the kind of dualism would be to separate things into these are religious and these activities are purely secular. And I think on both the left and right of the church, you have those who say that the church should only be involved in pure evangelism, and others who say that we should only be involved in acts of mercy and doing good works. When you've got those kinds of things happening within the church, what is the value of academic and intellectual and thought work?
The interaction between theology and the sciences, theology and law, theology and medicine is since 700 years since universities were founded, and mostly founded by churches or monasteries. So we have a long tradition of the interaction between theology and the other academic work. And we should not give up this in theology and the natural sciences. There's the insight in the contingency of the world, which is a creation of God, but not divine in itself. And there is the insight in the future open universe. Between theology and law are the Ten Commandments, form in the Sermon on the Mount, forming Christian laws, and between theology and medicine are the many ethic commissions today. So we cannot disengage from academic and intellectual work.
One of the most contentious areas of thought and debate that is having an effect on the lives of ordinary people, whether they realize it or not, is that of economics. And I was wondering if you had a view as to whether we could move towards a Christian economics, or if Christianity had particular principles to inform an economic system, or even choose between them.
Well, I'm a great defender of the social state. The social legislation came into being during the time of Bismarck in Germany, and he took at the model the social legislation of a special community in Elberfeld. So this is full of Christian ideas, the social state, security for everyone. And the second principle is fairness in competition. Competition must be not life and death question, but you must know where competition begins and where competition is limited and ends. And the third idea is the investment in the future. Not living on the costs of further generations, but invest in the future. This presupposes a strong and long-term hope. And this should be a Christian principle Christians from the first community at Pentecost know that there is enough for everyone. And this should be translated into global economics.
Christians should know that there is enough for everyone, and this should be translated into global economics. You gotta love that.
Love it.
Sounds like a commie to me.
Hey.
I mean, he's quoting Bismarck or saying Bismarck. And again, he's saying the social state, which is not the same as socialism. I'm pretty sure Bismarck was trying to ward off socialism by giving bits of socialism to people and creating what I think was the first national health kind of situation. I think that's what it was. Everybody pays a little bit in and you get, and then everybody gets taken care of. But still good stuff and great principle. And, you don't have to be a commie in order to, believe the right thing. I mean, it helps obviously, but yeah, it's, well, what do we think of that?
I just loved that comment. I've heard it before from him. Like, competition, it's just such a great response to, I don't know, those in the quote unquote center or the right that might talk about competition, we need that to thrive or whatever. Like, to respond in terms of, yeah, competition's fine, but not as a matter of life and death. I just think it's fucking brilliant. And just like, how can you argue with that?
Yeah.
To have, okay, maybe you feel there's a really bland vision put forward where, yeah, everyone's taken care of, but we all have the same little square house and little car that we drive, and there's there's no motivation to work or innovate or blah blah blah, which is wrong for different reasons. But just the notion that, like, how can you be against a universal basic income, for instance? If there is enough, everyone can be housed, everyone can be above the breadline, and then take it from there. Then sure, be an entrepreneur and whatever.
Yeah, I mean, like I do hear people when they say, yeah, but I mean, if there's what's the motivation to do better if, you don't get more reward? And, the answer is obviously that people get rewarded in a lot of different ways. And if you've ever been on a torrenting site, which I wouldn't obviously because it's illegal and streaming services are so reasonable and there's so few of them that you have to sign up to. So who would? But you go on that and you've got all these people who are doing things and competing with each other for no monetary or financial reward. But aside from that, okay, you want that competition, but do people, in your view of competition being motivating, let's say it's true, does it have to be the threat of starving to death or dying of a treatable illness? Does it have to, is that the only motivation? Is it that zero sum?
Also, it's a competition. Surely you want some people to be like, yeah, I'm okay not playing.
Yeah,
surely the ideal way to win a competition is fewer players.
Yeah.
But as long as those people, as we've said, are not starving to death.
Yeah, absolutely. Some people are fine with living a quite simple life if they don't have to. Yeah, no, absolutely. I love that. I also love the idea of a hope for the future, which is a big part of Moltmann's theology. And just that idea of if there is no hope in it, then that's a bad basis for a theology. Also, a bad basis for a theology is not talking about what we've been drinking or what we are.
What a good segue.
Drinking. I know. And Laura was in no way waving cans. That's a.
It wasn't my intention. I was just
waving. When I say waving cans at the camera, what I mean is her cider.
It's not a cider.
What is it?
It's a gin and tonic.
A gin and tonic can.
It's a gin and light tonic that I stole from Jonty's bar.
Excellent. Because Laura is living in my house.
I am. And I've put another one in the fridge.
Malky, what are you drinking?
I don't know, because I decanted it into a glass.
Interesting.
Right. What kind of drink is it?
Don't know. Could be Coca-Cola. Could be wine.
Could
I have
be
bad taste buds. No.
Paint thinners.
It's a non-alcoholic beer from Lidl.
Nice.
Middle a little.
You're right.
Hard thing to say.
You're right.
Middle.
You're right.
Someone's drink isn't non-alcoholic.
A I can't say it.
You were right, Laura. Can you smell
middle a
toast?
little.
No? What?
Middle a little.
No,
The
it's at
middle
the end.
aisle.
What are you saying?
Middle of Lidl.
The drinks and that are at the end
Yeah, I
bit.
know, but they might have some special stuff in the middle aisle. Sometimes they
that's
do.
Right, the middle aisle of
Middle of
okay.
Lidl.
It took
That's where you get your Lilos and your barbecues,
your
Wetsuits.
scuba gear.
Star Jacks.
I've genuinely
Red
I've bought
Mercury.
wetsuits from Lidl before.
Have you really?
Yeah, when we were kids, we bought wetsuits from Lidl.
Wow, look, I mean, that's twice in one episode talking about what age you were in 2013. And
Yeah, we get it.
Just
You're
buying
young,
stuff as a
Laura.
kid?
Wow.
I didn't buy it.
because no, I know. No, I'm not saying buying stuff as a kid. I'm pretty sure we didn't have Lidl and Aldi when I was a kid, is what I'm saying.
Oh, there you go. I'm so sorry to
Whoa.
be born.
Anyway, what are you drinking, Jonty?
I'm so sorry to be born. Wow. All right, Mum. So mine is South Africa's finest, 100% homegrown, South African's national
Wow.
beer, a legacy of excellence by Charles Glass, founder brewmaster, Castle Lager. And I've actually polished off a quart. I think I haven't.
I thought it was going to be a Tusker.
No,
You fucking
actually.
love that.
I do love Tusker, but it's not from this country because Africa's not a country. You racist.
Yeah,
Is it
sorry
from
about
Zimbabwe? Tusker.
No, it's from Kenya and Tanzania, I think.
Damn it.
Yeah, because I bought some for you when I was in Uganda,
Yeah.
which is next to Kenya. It's not in Kenya.
It's not in
to
Uganda,
Kenya.
Kenya.
It's very close.
I do love Tusker. And I also love, in Congo, we drank a lot of Primus, which was just really cool because I love the band Primus. And there's just signs everywhere for Primus. I was like, these guys love their funk core. Love this country. Okay,
But
this
you can
isn't...
get Tusker cider as well. I drank
as
it
well.
in Uganda.
Guys, Laura went to Uganda.
Yeah, I don't want to brag about it. I don't want to talk about it, to be honest.
Okay, let's listen to some more of The Good Professor.
The economic question is always closely linked to the political question. Christians in politics, particularly in the United States, but definitely not limited to that, have perhaps gained something of a bad reputation amongst people who believe in the social state. And as a result, people have been saying that Christianity should be separate from politics entirely, which is a strong stream of thought in the Western world. Should Christianity be separate from politics? Do we have anything distinctive to say within the political realm?
No, not at all. The one thing we learned from the Nazi state in Germany that we must involve as soon as possible if a dictatorship arises. The separation of politics and faith was an obstacle for many Christians to be involved in resistance against Hitler. And since that time, I would be involved in politics even if I'm wrong. But not to be involved is much worse.
So that's a controversial take, I think, especially when you consider the American Christo-fascists who are gaining quite a lot of traction, again, in the MAGA crowd, and are sometimes, think of the MAGA crowd as a little bit too soft for them. The people who don't want church and state separated. I don't think that's what he's saying. In fact, I think he's saying the direct opposite, and I think it's quite an interesting thing because he's saying the reason Christians should be political and should be involved in politics, specifically for him, is because they need to be ready to combat fascism, which is obviously very different from the Christo-fascists who say Christians should be involved in politics and the Bible should be the basis for our laws and the church should have influence over the state and all that kind of stuff. But it's a controversial take, no, Laura?
Yeah, I don't think that's what he's saying. I think you're right that he isn't saying that we should all get into politics so that we can impress the way that we are living based on the Bible and what we're and what it says, because that is fascism. Like, I don't know,
And
it's
fundamentalism.
Fundamentalism, yeah, and I think we should see it more as almost like a call to arms is maybe a bit strong way of thinking, but we should see that kind of thinking of like, hey, no, this is happening, and this is why Christians should be in politics, because like we are leaning very far to the right, and we need to be seeing these warning signs, and we need to be fighting against it as Christians.
Christians don't get to think of themselves as above politics.
Yeah.
Malky, what did you think of it? Especially what he said when he said we should be involved in politics even if we're wrong.
Well, again, it's that sort of sense of it's not going in there with a swagger, you know, and with triumphalism or those like definite answers. It's being there, it's being a presence and being a kind of, I don't know, prophetic voice. But it's interesting. I'd like to read more or hear more in terms of where you can get into that messy business of being too entangled in the power of the day. You know, because
I think I've always been wary since we've done a while ago now, but episodes we did on Christian nationalism. I have always been kind of wary of the combination of church and state for that reason. I think we have dangerous. I think Christian nationalism is a dangerous thing, and in that sense, the combination of church and state is not a good thing. But there has to be, I don't know, there's a kind of sweet spot that you have to get in there of kind of like you said, being above politics and also not going too far.
And I think I never trust a call to moderation, shockingly for my personality. But I think there is a difference between uniting church and state and saying that Christians should be involved in politics. Christians being political, I think, is unavoidable. I think some of the most political acts the church has done is by allowing a status quo that is unjust to be perpetuated because Christians refuse to get involved in politics. That's not the same as church and state being united or having influence over each other. I think it's worth making that distinction and obviously recognizing what Moltmann is saying there, but also, I think the difficult thing is that I find it tough. The toughest part of that for me is the even if you're wrong, you know, because it's so close to that kind of smug centrist approach to Christians should be involved in political parties. It doesn't matter what party. Yes, it does fucking matter which party. It does. Justify which party. Don't just pick a party and go, well, we should all be in there, because unless, you know, it's like saying, oh, well, Christians should be in every job, every workplace, every type of one. You can't say that we shouldn't be in any of them. Well, firstly, that's what the early church said. The early church excommunicated people for being in the army. You know, there are some jobs that they didn't think were in any way compatible. But if you believe that, so we need more Christian pimps, more Christian strip club owners, more Christian arms dealers, torturers. What is that? No, obviously it's nonsense. And in the same way, so Christians, this is such a good thing for them to be in politics, regardless of what. So you want Christians to join fascist parties? No, obviously not. No, it does matter. And I think trying to find what you believe Christ's teachings to mean, backed up with your understanding of what scripture means and your understanding of what the faith means and what it has historically meant to Christians. I think that should play a part in how you choose these things, I would have thought. But yeah. Right, let's hear some more.
When we get to questions of the environment, of creation care, there is particularly amongst fundamentalists, a stream of thinking that says that the world is going to be destroyed by fire anyway, so there's no point in protecting it now. What would you say to that sort of view?
This is blasphemy against the Creator, the Savior, and the Holy Spirit poured out on all flesh. I reject this idea that the world is going to hell anyway. This is cynicism and has nothing to do with faith in God, the Creator, the Savior, and the Holy Spirit. And if some Christians read the apocalyptic verses in the New Testament, they should read to the end, because the Christian hope always says, in the end is the beginning, and therefore we don't give up this world to hell.
Love it. Great. I think we should end more arguments by just being like, oh, that's blasphemy. I think that's just a fantastic way to end an argument. Yeah, like, you can't fault that. Like, he's so right.
And I love the idea of the Christian hope is that the end is always the beginning. The idea of your Savior just got crucified, yes, and you won't believe what happens next.
Yeah.
And just the idea that even in terrible things, it can be, what's that Gungor thing? You make beautiful things out of.
But yeah, there's a lovely cyclical imagery that I wonder if we in the West have made the Bible into a beginning, middle, and end linear format, where it's much more about, like, you know, a new Eden, a new beginning, and starting again. And, you know, maybe we get born again in a different body, and then we die, and then we go into a new body. Right, that's in the Bible, right? If you're good,
and all the good
get a
things
bigger-
and all the bad things that you do in your life, they get counted up, and depending on how many bad things you did, it depends on what body you end up in
Yeah.
in
so
your next
that's
life.
why poor people have been bad in a previous life. That kind of makes it. Yeah, I think that seems all right.
Are we dangerously close
I
to
think
a
that's
religious hate
blasphemy,
crime?
Malky. I think that's blasphemy, and I reject that. Yeah.
Thank you for your rebuke. I'll go back and check that out.
I read a piece recently by a Christian art theorist who said that great Christian art should have aspects of hospitality, of showing somebody something clear and showing them respect, and giving them an experience of truth while showing them respect. What would you define as great Christian art?
Well, church music, Handel and Bach, and this attracts not only believers, but also unbelievers.
Yeah.
This is a great tradition of Christian art. And I'm not an expert on modern films, but I think Christianity is a religion of memory and of hope. We have a book and developed hermeneutics to understand what was written 2,000 years before. And this hermeneutics, the art of understanding, influenced modern philosophy very much. So to have a story to memorize and a hope to imagine is a contribution of Christianity to the world of fine arts.
Memory and hope. That's beautiful.
Very beautiful.
I kind of love that.
It feels like a similar train as the anti-intellectualism. Like, I suppose I did encounter anti-intellectual Christianity growing up, but also, as I discovered the intellectual part, then that came hand in hand with being anti-art, I think, because that was that fundamentalist stream where apologetics led me into kind of a fundamentalist conservatism that's afraid of imagination and hope in that sense of opening and broadening that I've heard Moltmann talk about elsewhere. but just that, yeah, the sort of embracing of God in us, God beyond, I don't know, the sort of safe boundaries that we've seen to open discussion and experience through, music and literature and ideas and these modern films they have these days,
I think it's an interesting and a difficult one in a lot of ways, because when we're talking about the idea of good Christian art, air quotes, I've heard kind of thought of like, well, it has to be kind of has to be an open door for somebody to kind of experience Christianity in a good way, and I think I get the honesty side of that and the kind of sharing that, but also a lot of people have experienced a lot of pain related to Christianity, and I don't think we should. Like, you can't deny that in a lot of people's art, and a lot of people are going to create art to express that. And I don't think that has to be proselytizing, Like, I think you can just make art and have this be my experience. And I think it should be honest, but I don't think that has to be a doorway into creating. Like, I love what he says about good church music and how that speaks to Christians and non-Christians alike, because I love that sort of stuff. I'm probably a surface classical music lover, basic. I know the basics, but I don't think we use classical music to get people into the church. I think you can just enjoy it for what it is. I don't know.
But I think isn't that kind of what makes it powerful, is because
sure, yeah.
It offers something universal that you're kind of proselytizing, didactic, slightly simplistic, vaguely veiled reimagining of a Bible story, or, a rap with a Christian message. It's not going to connect in the deep way. Some of that will work for a lot of people, I'm sure. And I was massively into Tooth and Nail Records and Rex Records and all of these great 90s Christian labels. But it's not Bach. It's not speaking to a kind of transcendent truth. It's not old Makoto Fujimura and his abstract expressionist or verging on abstract expressionist stuff that illustrated his illuminated version of the King James Bible. It's not a Terrence Malick film, like you watch Tree of Life, I think is just a stunning example of it. It's not hitting you over the head with a message or an ideology. It's just showing you something incredibly beautiful and painful, and it feels true, like great art should, but with that sense of hope and memory. I don't know, truth, hope, and memory. That's a good
Pretty
recipe.
Good trio.
Yeah.
Tag yourself.
And again, you have the that communication or expression, and that sort of very Protestant. We must communicate truth, quote
in
unquote,
words,
in words, and in that
propositional statements.
That's the one, yeah, because that's what your rap is doing. That you alluded to. It's communicating this idea. It's not like actually we've gone, through the dark night of the soul, and some expression is coming out of that.
Absolutely.
Like that's how I get my Jordan Peterson pictures, basically.
Very beautiful.
I didn't start out that way, it just came from somewhere.
For you personally, as a theologian, how do you feel your theology has developed over the years? Are there characteristics that you would say have changed clearly, or has it been pretty much kind of plain sailing as to where you were maybe 30 years ago?
No, I'm changing, of course. I'm a living person and not a stone. I started with the concept of history under the aspects of hope, and then came to the ecological questions and developed an understanding of reality as creation, and so on. I'm not an authority. I feel more like a brother and a friend in a large community where I learn and speak and give what I can and take what I can. So I'm only one piece in a long chain of people.
I kind of love that from somebody who is acknowledged as at least the most significant theologian of the latter half of the 20th century. That's some good stuff. I wish I had that kind of humility, and I have achieved sweet fuck all with my life. That's kind of beautiful and a nice way to approach things like hierarchy and influence and all that. Any final thoughts on Professor Moltmann, guys?
I think he spoke beautifully, but with good truth, and yeah, some good rules to live by. I think, almost like a religion. I'm just kidding.
I do love his humility, and that difference between false humility and just genuinely, you can tell that's what he believes,
Yeah.
And at the same time, he doesn't mess around in his answers to questions. I'm just like, what would you say? Oh, it's blasphemy. Have you changed? I'm not a fucking stone, man.
That's really good.
I'm a human being.
Oh god.
Lovely stuff.
Yeah, it's so good. Anyway, the sad news that Professor Moltmann died recently, and we hope that all of his family and everyone who was close to him is okay. Do pray for them. And yeah, just good that somebody like that existed and had the influence that he did. And what a privilege to be able to talk about it and talk about him and his thought and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, thanks for listening. You can find more from Beer Christianity, beerchristianity.co.uk. You can find us on all the socials. We still have part 2 of our series on deconstruction coming up. Do get in touch, beerchristianity@yahoo.com if there's stuff you'd like us to cover, or if you have any comments on what we've been covering. And yeah, have a drink and toast Jürgen Moltmann.
African storytellers finish their story very often with the phrase, "What was good in the story belongs to you. What was poor in the story remains my property." And this is my last word